The late afternoon sun hit Ethan Caldwell's windshield like a spotlight as he cut the engine and stepped onto the dirt road, polished dress shoes, sinking into dust that didn't belong in his world. Up ahead, at the doorway of a crumbling clay house, stood Monique Johnson, the quiet cleaner who had kept his downtown condo spotless for nearly 2 years. She froze. The moment she saw him, a baby pressed tight to her chest, 2 little girls clinging to her legs like life rafts. Ethan stopped about 10 feet away. Breath caught, staring at bare feet, torn hems, and wide eyes that didn't know whether to run or beg. Monique's lips trembled first. "Mr. Caldwell, please, don't fire me. I need this job." The words tumbled out with a desperation that made the air feel thin. Ethan's gaze moved over the cracked walls, the broken roof tiles, the ragged cloth hanging in the window, then back to the children, silent, as if they'd learned that making noise was dangerous. "How long have you lived like this?" he asked, voice rough. "Since I started working for you," she whispered. 2 years. 2 years of marble floors and leftovers thrown away while Lila 7 went to school only when she could. Harper 5 wasn't even enrolled, and baby Micah 10 months slept under a roof that leaked. Something in Ethan shifted sharp and irreversible. "You're not losing your job," he said, then added quieter but firm. "You're leaving here today. This isn't charity. It's justice." Monique didn't move at first. Her shoulders stayed high like she was bracing for a blow that had already landed. The baby shifted against her, a soft whimper swallowed by the heat, and she rocked him with a practiced rhythm, eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "You don't understand," she said, voice thin as paper. "If you knew I had 3 kids, if you knew where I lived, you'd think I couldn't handle the work." Her fingers tightened around the baby's blanket until her knuckles blanched. "You'd think I'd miss days. You'd think I'd ask for money. You'd think I'd be a problem." Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out, because she wasn't guessing, she was describing him. He saw himself in flashes, the way he'd glanced past her, like she was part of the furniture, the way he'd complained about a streak on glass while dinner leftovers went into the trash. He'd never asked if she had family. Never asked how she got home. Never wondered why she always arrived early, smelling faintly of bus exhaust, hands rough from bleach and hot water. Monique's eyes glistened, but she didn't wipe them. "I couldn't risk it," she whispered the words scraping out of her throat. "This job is the only thing between my kids and—" She looked over her shoulder at the cracked doorway, the darkness inside, and the sentence collapsed. One tear slid down her cheek, then another. So I stayed quiet. I kept my head down. I made myself invisible. Ethan felt something hot sting behind his eyes, shame, sharp and unfamiliar. The dust swirled around his shoes, and for the first time he understood it wasn't just dirt on the road. It was everything he'd ignored. Ethan swallowed and took one slow step closer, careful like a man approaching a wounded animal. The older girl, Lila, flinched anyway. Harper slid behind her sister, both of them pressing their small shoulders into Monique's legs, as if they could disappear into her skirt. Ethan stopped again, hands open at his sides, palms visible. No sudden moves, no sharp voice, just the sound of wind dragging grit across the road and Monique's breathing tight, fast, fighting panic. Up close, he could see everything he'd missed from a distance. Harper's scraped knees, the faint imprint of dried mud along her ankles, the way Lila's eyes tracked him with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 7-year-old. And Micah, 10 months old, stared at him with calm, pale curiosity. One tiny fist knotted into Monique's shirt, as if she were the only safe thing left on Earth. Ethan's chest tightened. He'd built companies, negotiated $1 million deals without blinking, but this This quiet fear in 3 children hit him harder than any loss on a balance sheet. He looked at Monique's face, the sweat at her hairline, the tremor in her jaw, the pride she was trying to hold together with sheer willpower. She wasn't asking for pity. She was begging for permission to keep surviving. "I'm not here to punish you," he said, voice low, steady, meant for her, but gentle enough for the girls to hear. Lila's gaze flickered, still guarded, but listening. Ethan nodded once, like sealing a promise with his own body. I didn't know. And I should have known." Monique's eyes widened, hope and disbelief colliding in the same breath, like she was afraid to reach for it, because hope had betrayed her before. Ethan felt the old version of himself trying to climb back into place, the one that measured people in efficiency and output, and whether they made his life easier. But standing there in the heat, watching Monique brace her whole body between him and her children, that version suddenly looked small. Ugly. Out of date. He glanced down at his suit tailored expensive clean, and then at the dirt under Lila's nails, the frayed strap on Harper's sandal that wasn't even there anymore because she had no sandals. A memory flashed, last week's dinner party plates half full, the careless sweep of his hand as servers cleared away food that could have fed this family for days. He'd complained about a late delivery like it was a tragedy, and all the while Monique had been scrubbing his countertops with quiet hands, smiling politely, taking the bus back to a house that could collapse in the next storm. His throat tightened. "How did I not ask?" He muttered, more to himself than to her. Monique didn't answer. She just held Micah closer, as if the question was dangerous, as if any wrong word could snap the fragile thread keeping her job and their lives together. Ethan looked into her eyes and saw something that didn't match the word cleaner endurance. The kind that wakes up before dawn, rides 2 buses, works a full day, then comes home to 3 hungry mouths and no room for weakness. He exhaled slowly, like he was letting go of a life he'd been clinging to. "I've been paying you like your life didn't matter," he said quietly. The admission tasted like rust. "And I've been living like yours couldn't touch mine. That ends today." Monique stared at him like he'd spoken a language she wasn't allowed to understand. Then Ethan's eyes drifted to the girls again, and he forced himself to ask the questions he'd spent years avoiding. "How old are they?" he said softly, nodding toward the 2 small bodies pressed into her. Monique's face changed just for a second, the fear loosening enough to let love show through. "Lila's 7, she murmured, brushing a thumb along her oldest daughter's cheek. "Harper's 5. And Micah, he's 10 months. The baby blinked up at Ethan, then buried his face in Monique's collar with a sleepy sigh. "Do they go to school?" Ethan asked. Monique's jaw tightened. Her eyes dropped to the ground like the truth weighed too much to hold. "Lila goes when I can make it happen," she admitted, voice cracking at the edges. "But Harper, I haven't been able to enroll her yet." Harper's fingers curled in the fabric of Monique's shirt, as if she could hide inside that answer. Ethan's stomach turned. 5 years old, and already left behind. He looked at Lila, too quiet, too alert, and saw a child who'd learned to manage silence like survival. "Is there anyone helping you?" he asked. "Family, a friend." Monique shook her head once, sharp and final. "No one." The word came out flat, like she'd repeated it to herself every night just to keep standing. "My mom died when I was 15. I never knew my father. And their fathers." She swallowed, hard eyes shining without permission. "They never wanted to know." The dirt road seemed to narrow around them. Ethan felt the weight of it, 3 little futures balanced on one exhausted woman's spine. And for the first time, he didn't just see poverty. He saw isolation. And he knew he couldn't unsee it. Ethan's phone was already in his hand before Monique could finish wiping her tears with the back of her wrist. He turned slightly, shielding the screen from the kids like he didn't want them to see how urgent this was, and he took a breath that sounded more like a decision than air. "Monique," he said. "Steady, now. Listen to me. You're not staying here." Her eyes snapped up alarm first, then pride. "I can't take charity," she whispered, clutching Micah tighter. "I don't want you thinking I'm—" "Stop!" Ethan cut in gently but firm, like a door closing on an old habit. He stepped closer and lowered his voice so the girls could hear the calm in it. "This isn't charity. It's justice. I underpaid you. I ignored you. I don't get to pretend that's normal." He turned away just enough to make the call. 1 ring, 2. His assistant answered, and Ethan didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need a furnished apartment today. 2 bedrooms. Safe neighborhood. Near a public school. Keys by late afternoon. I don't care what it costs, handle it." He ended the call before questions could form, then faced Monique again. "Pack the basics," he said, pointing toward the broken doorway like he was drawing a line between before and after. "Clothes, diapers, whatever matters. 10 minutes. I'll wait right here." Monique's lips parted, trembling with a hope she didn't trust. Lila watched him like she was measuring him for danger. Harper's chin quivered. Ethan crouched just slightly, bringing himself down closer to their level. "You're safe," he said, and this time he meant it with his whole body. Monique finally nodded once, swallowed hard, and stepped inside like she was walking into darkness to grab her life with both hands. Monique came back out with a single battered tote bag, the kind that had been patched, repatched, and still kept ripping at the seams. It looked impossibly light for a family of 4, and that fact hit Ethan harder than the crumbling walls ever could. Lila followed first, gripping Harper's hand like she was the adult, her eyes fixed on the ground, as if hope was something you tripped over. Harper stayed close to her sister's shoulder, blinking fast, trying not to cry. Micah rested against Monique's chest, drowsy and warm, unaware that his whole life was about to shift. Ethan opened the back door of his car and stepped aside, giving them space. "Take your time," he said, even though his own heartbeat was loud in his ears. Lila climbed in, carefully pulling Harper up after her. They sat pressed together, knees touching shoulders, hunched still, braced for someone to change their mind. Monique hesitated at the passenger door, one hand on the handle, the other tightening around the tote like it was the last thing she owned that couldn't be taken away. She glanced back at the house, at the dark doorway, the broken roofline, the dirt yard, with nothing to soften it. Ethan followed her gaze and felt something twist inside him. 2 years. 2 years of her scrubbing his sinks and folding his shirts, then returning to this with no audience, no applause, no safety net. He swallowed, forcing his voice steady. "You don't have to look back," he said quietly. Monique nodded once, almost angry at her own tears, and got in. When Ethan slid behind the wheel, he didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, breathing like a man, realizing that the distance between his life and theirs had never been miles. It had been indifference. Then he turned the key, and the car rolled forward, carrying them out of hiding. The city lights came into view like a different planet. Glass towers, storefronts, people walking with nowhere to hide. In the rearview mirror, Ethan caught Lila's face pressed to the window, eyes wide, tracking every passing car as if motion itself was a miracle. Harper had fallen asleep against her sister's shoulder mouth, slightly open, exhausted, in a way no 5-year-old should be. Monique sat rigid in the passenger seat tote bag at her feet, Micah's weight warm on her lap. She kept glancing down at him, then back up at the road like she was waiting for the catch. Ethan cleared his throat. "We're stopping first," he said, turning into a large clothing store with bright windows and blasting air conditioning. The moment they stepped inside, the cold air wrapped around them, and both girls froze, stunned by the lights. The rose of color, the soft music, the clean smell. Monique instinctively made herself smaller shoulders, curling inward like someone might tap her on the arm and say, "You don't belong here." A sales associate approached with a practiced smile. Ethan didn't hesitate. I need complete outfits for 3 kids' shoes, too. And for her, he said, nodding toward Monique. Monique shook her head hard. No, just for them, she whispered, voice tight with pride. Ethan met her eyes and held them. For you too, he said, calm, but unmovable. You're not invisible in here. Lila reached for a simple pair of sneakers, like they were fragile glass. Harper lifted a pink dress and hugged it to her chest, daring herself to want it. And when Ethan nodded when he said, "Get what you like," something cracked open in the girls' faces. Not laughter yet, but the first real hint of it, the kind that starts a new life. By the time they reached the checkout, Monique's hands were shaking. Not from cold this time, but from the sheer impossibility of what was happening. Bags piled up fast, socks and uniform sneakers that actually fit a little jacket for Micah. Lila held tight to the handles like someone might snatch them away. Harper kept peeking inside her own bag, eyes shining as if the color could vanish if she blinked too long. At the register, the cashier glanced at the children and smiled. "What a beautiful family," she said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Monique's face flushed. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out because for so long family had meant 4 people trying to stay quiet enough not to be noticed. Ethan slid his card across the counter without even looking at the total. The beep of approval sounded small, but it landed like a gavel done. Real. No taking it back. Outside, the late-day heat rushed back in, but the girls didn't flinch. Lila walked a little straighter, her grip still cautious, but no longer desperate. Harper skipped once, just a single hesitant hop, then looked up at Monique to see if she was allowed to be happy. Monique's eyes filled again, and she nodded a tiny permission slip, written in tears. In the car, Ethan's assistant texted an address. "We've got the apartment," he said, and Monique turned toward him so fast her ponytail brushed her cheek. Fear rose first, then disbelief, then something softer that scared her even more, hope. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, voice steady. "This is the part where your kids stop shrinking," he said. "They get to take up space." The building wasn't fancy. No marble lobby, no chandeliers, but it stood solid, clean, real. A small playground sat out front, the paint chipped, but the swing still hanging. Harper spotted it first and sucked in a breath like she'd just seen the ocean. "Mom." "A swing," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make it disappear. Monique's fingers tightened around the tote strap. Her eyes flicked from the doorman's desk to Ethan's face, searching for the punchline that never came. "It's here," Ethan said, reading the address off his phone. "2nd floor, apartment 23. Monique barely nodded, her body moving on instinct, while her mind stayed behind on that dirt road still waiting for the world to correct itself. The elevator hummed. Lila held Harper's hand, guiding her like a protective shadow, but even she couldn't hide the crack of curiosity in her eyes. When the doors opened, Ethan led them down a quiet hallway and stopped at a simple door. The doorman handed over the keys with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said, and Monique flinched at the word, like she'd never been welcomed anywhere in her life. Ethan unlocked the door and stepped aside. "Go on." Monique crossed the threshold and froze. A small living room, a couch, curtains already hung, a kitchen with a working fridge and a table that could actually hold a family meal, 2 bedrooms, one with a bunk bed that made Harper gasp out loud. "I want the top," she blurted, and then clapped a hand over her mouth, startled by her own voice. Lila didn't scold her. She laughed quiet at first, like she was testing the sound, then louder when Harper giggled back. Monique stood in the doorway with Micah on her hip, trembling. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not dramatic, just steady, unstoppable. Ethan didn't rush her. He simply rested a hand on the doorframe, watching the girls fill the space with life. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said softly. "This is yours now, and you're not doing this alone." Monique tried to speak, but the words wouldn't line up. She set Micah down gently on the couch like it might break, then stood there with her hands hovering in the air, unsure what to do when your home isn't falling apart. Ethan stayed a few steps back, letting the moment belong to them. He watched Lila run her fingers along the bunk bed ladder, still careful, still expecting someone to say, "Not for you." Harper darted to the curtains and peeked outside, then turned and smiled, wide, bright, unafraid. It was the first time Ethan realized how heavy fear looks when it finally lifts. Monique wiped her cheeks with the heel of her palm, embarrassed by the tears, but they kept coming anyway. "I don't know how to repay you," she whispered. Ethan shook his head, voice low. "You're not repaying me. I'm making it right." He pulled out his phone and opened a note like he'd been holding this decision in his chest for years. "Starting tomorrow, your pay doubles. Full benefits. Paid time off. And if one of the kids is sick, you stay with them. No panic, no punishment." Monique's breath hitched. She covered her mouth, shoulders folding as relief finally found a place to land. "And school," Ethan added, looking toward the girls' room where their laughter echoed. "We're getting both girls enrolled. Supplies, uniforms, everything. They don't start their future late just because life was hard early." Monique nodded, crying quietly, not from humiliation, this time from dignity. "Sometimes the biggest kindness isn't money. It's seeing someone before they have to beg to be seen. A fair wage, a little attention, a simple, 'How are you really doing?' can change a life. And it can change you too. If this story moved you, comment below. When was a time someone truly saw you, or when you wish they had? And if you want more stories like this with real heart and real lessons, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.